Hi, welcome back to part 2 of my favorite third places in Korea. If you haven't watched part 1 where I introduced the concept of a third place, I recommend checking that out. Unlike the first video, this will contain places outside of Seoul, and I also have a voiceover throughout to share more information since I realize the captions have its limits. I hope you enjoy. Just to backtrack a bit, I live in the States but visit Korea every once in a while to see my dad and family. I landed on New Year's Day 2025, so I stopped by my grandma's place first, which always feels nostalgic. I was actually born and raised in Seoul until the 5th grade, so this really feels like home to me. The first place I'll introduce in this video is Bundobang, a pottery gallery in Pangyo where they showcase wheel-thrown porcelain. I've been obsessed with the Korean moon jar for a while, so I wanted to see their interpretations in person. I ended up purchasing a soup bowl since they're more known for tableware, but I really appreciated how the display was just as detailed and intentional as the pottery itself. And I love the architecture around this neighborhood. There's a bunch of galleries and restaurants nearby. This was a really cool entrance to a residential home, and I'm practically obsessed with pine trees in Korea. They're just not the same as the ones we have in the States. And this was my walk back home. I promise it looks less scary than it appears. The tunnel actually plays classical music, and it really adds to the immersive experience. This was a random Monday when I went on a solo date in Hannam-dong, one of my favorite neighborhoods in Korea. I encountered this cafe on my way to a bookstore. I was planning on going to a different coffee shop, but the coffered ceiling design with the Korean folklore animals immediately intrigued me and I needed to check it out. And it was so worth it. I got a peppermint tea and this Madeleine from a different cafe, which I'll show in the next clip. And I read The Vegetarian by Hong Kong. I finished it a while ago, but it was nothing like I've read before. I highly recommend. It's so violent yet reserved, and there's just so many allegories in it. Right next to this cafe is Post Poetics, a bookstore that exclusively carries art and interior architecture books. And it reminded me a lot of Dashwood books in Lower Manhattan. They carry out-of-print titles and rare photography books. And this mention is obviously hinting towards a new video on New York. Going back to the Madeleine featured in the earlier clip, it was from this cafe called Le Soleil, also within walking distance. They have all the flavors you could possibly imagine, from corn, nut, red velvet, mugwort, chocolate, you name it. I had a bit more time to kill before dinner plans, so I Ubered to the Grand Hyatt Hotel just to grab tea and read more at the lounge. They even have an ice rink where you can usually see the view of the Namsan Mountain and a bird's eye view of the city. They have great amenities, so I highly recommend if you're looking for a place to stay in Seoul. So the next place featured in this video is where I had dinner plans with my dad. It's called Wongjunghun, and it's on the 20th floor of this building. They specialize in Korean-style Chinese cuisine. Their dim sums, highly recommend. Their shumais, you can't go wrong with, and the pork with greens as well. But the highlight of this meal was definitely the jjajangmyeon, which is the black soybean noodle dish. Every road trip has to start with a good meal. My friend and I traveled to Paju, an hour north of Seoul, closer to the DMZ, and this was called Hansui Yakchobapsang, specializing in healthy Korean traditional banchans. After we filled our stomachs, we headed over to the Mimesis Art Museum, designed by Portuguese architect Álvaro Siza, who won the Pritzker Prize in '92, and it's considered the Nobel Prize in architecture. Aside from the artwork, the spaces itself really embodied functional simplicity, where Siza's minimalist approach lets the light and structure take center stage. I loved how he played with geometric deformations like you see here. It allows so much natural light to illuminate the artwork. But our real motivation for traveling to Paju was to experience this bookstay guest house. It's called Motif 1, and the building was designed by Korean architect Min Seok Cho. I was really proud to see that he was selected to design the Serpentine Pavilion last year. Their library has over 20,000 books on these shelves handmade from Korean pine trees, and the coziest rooms with large windows on 2 adjacent walls that open up to the landscape outside. So after we checked in, we walked over to this Hanok cafe called Little Garden. We ordered a mugwort cake and ginger cinnamon latte. It was so good. And basically lingered here, just catching up until the sun went down. And then we were so full, we decided to just share one bowl of ramen at the convenience store nearby. Korea has these machines that cook it for you, and it should definitely be on your Korea bucket list. When we got back to our guest house, our host provided us with 2 glasses of vingcho, which means hot wine in French, I think. She put cinnamon sticks and a bunch of other spices, which made it really good. We read some more before we went to bed, and I wrote my friend a Christmas card because she fell asleep before me. So the next morning, we just had a simple breakfast, and I was pretty sad to leave this place. I honestly think if you're staying here, it should be for at least 2 nights. And after checking out, we headed over to brunch at this cafe called Still Moment. It's a family-owned small business. I think we ordered their cabbage steak, which was vegan, with this jambong bear and potato soup, as well as a cod roe pasta. So definitely a lot of food for 2 people. After brunch, we walked over to a music listening space called Camerata. You pay a small admission fee of about $10, and they provide you with a free drink of your choice, unlimited listening, as well as books you can read from their upstairs library. There's this huge floating wood board that serves as both the ceiling and floor in the space. It's hanging from the concrete ceiling, and there are gaps that are created between the timbers to absorb sound and act as an acoustic barrier. This was our final stop in Paju before we went back to Seoul. It's called Kongchino Concrete. It's a concert hall designed by architect Hyunjun Min. And this site just is wonderful scenically. And as the architect himself puts it, the site mingles with the glow of the setting sun against the backdrop of the North Korean landscape. I love how architect Min played with the idea of what would happen if sight and sound meet, and how should the architecture respond to the sense of touch. Before we went back to Seoul, we stopped by halfway at this neighborhood called Yeonjinnaeok. And we serendipitously discovered this amazing street food vendor at the market and could not resist ordering their spicy rice and fish cakes. My elementary school friend, who was in the army base actually nearby, was able to make it out for a couple of hours, so we headed to YM Coffee Project to catch up, drank some drip coffee, and their Basque cheesecake was so good. Now I just have some footage of random places that I ended up loving. The first one being this Manhattan loft-inspired smoothie cafe in Gangnam. It's called Glass Tears, and I think the owner was inspired by the Erewhon smoothies, and this one had sea moss in it. This was probably my favorite meal during the entire Korea trip. I went back to this restaurant called Cheonghee like 3 times. They have really fun twists on traditional Korean dishes, like this vongole-based hand-cut noodle and this cream-based sujebi. Alright, next is hands down the best bakery right now in Korea, called Standard Bread in Gangnam. They have fresh loaves of bread out of the oven every 30 minutes, and it's in a 4-story building where the first floor you order your bread, second floor is for coffee and drinks, third and fourth are just all seating areas. This is a 24/7 cafe called the November Lounge that I went with my cousins. This is another random street food vendor. I highly recommend adding to your bucket list trying Korea's winter exclusive snacks like hotteok, which is fried dough, or bungeoppang, which is a fish-shaped dough. It's the perfect remedy for the cold. Thanks so much for watching till the end of this video. This wraps up my 2 weeks in Korea during winter break. Wherever you are, I hope you're staying cozy, safe, and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video.